George R.R. Martin wrote one version. House of the Dragon told a completely different story, and that single decision changed everything. Most fans think the biggest changes in House of the Dragon are things like battle, missing characters, or altered death. They're wrong. The biggest change isn't a scene. It isn't a dragon. It isn't even a character. It's the entire lens through which the story is told. Because in Fire and Blood, the Dance of the Dragons is primarily a political war. In House of the Dragon, it's a tragedy about two former best friends destroying the world around them, and that changes the meaning of the entire story. To understand this change, we need to understand something important. Fire and Blood isn't a normal novel, it's a history book. A fictional history book written by Archmaester Gildane centuries after the events occurred. The story is presented through conflicting accounts from different sources. Nobody knows the complete truth. Every event is filtered through bias, rumor, and politics. In the book, Rhaenyra Targaryen and Alicent Hightower are not childhood best friends. In fact, Alicent is significantly older than Rhaenyra. Their relationship is mostly political. There's tension, there's rivalry, but there isn't this deep emotional bond the show created, and that's where HBO made its most important decision. In House of the Dragon, Alicent and Rhaenyra begin as inseparable friends. They share secrets, dreams, fears. They're practically sisters. Then, the system tears them apart. Alicent marries Viserys. Rhaenyra feels betrayed. Years of misunderstandings, manipulation, and political pressure slowly transform friendship into conflict. Suddenly, the Dance of the Dragons isn't just about succession. It's personal. Every battle, every betrayal, every death feels connected to the collapse of that relationship. This is a massive departure from the book's structure. Instead of a historical conflict between factions, the show creates an emotional core, and because of that, viewers aren't just watching a war, they're watching a friendship die. The answer is actually pretty simple. Television needs emotional anchors. A history book can describe decades of political events. A television series needs characters audiences can emotionally invest in. By making Alicent and Rhaenyra childhood friends, HBO created a human story at the center of an enormous civil war. Suddenly, every decision hurts more. Every victory feels tragic. Every loss feels personal. Even people who know nothing about Westerosi history can understand one universal idea: friends becoming enemies. That's why many critics praised the change during Season 1. Even George R.R. Martin initially praised several additions and expansions made by the series, particularly character-focused material that wasn't deeply explored in Fire and Blood. But not everyone agrees. Many readers argue that this change fundamentally alters the story's themes. In Fire and Blood, the Dance of the Dragons is about ambition, power, dynastic politics, family greed, the destruction caused by noble houses fighting for control. The personal relationship between Alicent and Rhaenyra isn't the central focus. The political collapse of House Targaryen is. Critics argue that by making everything revolve around their friendship, the show sometimes reduces larger political forces into personal drama. This debate became even bigger after Season 2 introduced additional scenes and interactions not found in the source material, sparking discussions among fans about how far adaptation should go when changing established events. The controversy reached another level when George R.R. Martin publicly discussed concerns about certain adaptation changes. One issue he highlighted involved the removal of Prince Maelor, warning that seemingly small changes can create a butterfly effect that impacts later storylines. His point wasn't simply that every change is bad. Adaptations always change things. His concern was that one alteration often forces many more changes later, and that's exactly why the Alicent-Rhaenyra relationship matters so much, because once you change the emotional foundation of the story, everything built on top of it changes too. Character motivations change, conversations change, themes change, the audience's understanding of the conflict changes. The story becomes something new. So here's the real question. Did House of the Dragon improve Fire and Blood, or did it transform George R.R. Martin's political tragedy into a completely different story? Because one thing is certain, when you compare the book and the show, you're not looking at two versions of the same tale. You're looking at two different interpretations of the fall of House Targaryen. And that may be the most fascinating adaptation choice in all of Westeros. Subscribe for theories, lore, hidden details, and deep breakdowns from the world's greatest fantasy worlds, mystery novels, comics, movies, and TV series. Until next time, keep questioning the story, keep searching for the clues, and keep exploring the worlds beyond the page.